The owners of a gold country property in California found 8 cans of gold coins while they walked their grounds in February of 2013. It became known as the Saddle Ridge Hoard because of a rock they named near their find, and has become the largest known discovery of buried gold coins. They don't know who buried the coins, and several theories were circulated that have never been substantiated, including a San Francisco Mint employee that stole $30,000 of coins in 1901, a hidden treasure from outlaws like Jesse James or Black Bart, and even a stash buried by a group called Knights of the Golden Circle to fund a second civil war. It's still a mystery. Boris Karloff is best known for portraying the Frankenstein monster in the 1931 movie. While living in Hollywood, he kept a large, beautiful rose garden. The garden was so admired that a few of his friends requested to have their ashes spread amongst the rose bushes after they died, which he obliged to. Since then, people have claimed the property to be haunted. Boris even had a strange event occur on the property when he lived there on January 14, 1939. 3 of his cars burned with no cause. Boris did not die at the home, but died on February 2, 1969 in England. The Salem witch trials began in February of 1692, accusing more than 200 people of being witches. 25 people died because of these frantic, paranoia-driven events. Eventually, many of the accused were exonerated years later. The last conviction overturned was for Elizabeth Johnson by the Massachusetts Senate on May 26, 2022. It's still debated what would cause this hysteria to take hold, but we do know that it created a lot of injustice. Researchers aren't sure what the labyrinths were created for, but there are a concentration of about 14 of them on the Bolshoi Zayatsky Island in Arkhangelsk Oblast, Russia. At least one archaeological study dates the labyrinths to about 2,500 years ago. Were they used for fishing or to help souls pass through to the other side? The earliest mentions of the mythical creature, the Wendigo, can be found among the folklore of the Plains and Great Lakes natives. It said a cold chill and a strong foul odor signaled its close proximity. Then a sense of insatiable hunger for human flesh pervades. In the winter of 1878, an Alberta trapper named Swift Runner succumbed to Wendigo psychosis and killed and ate his wife and 5 children. The Goddard coin, also known as the Maine penny because it was discovered in Maine in 1957, is a Norwegian silver coin dating back to the 11th century. Guy Melgren said he found the coin at the Goddard archaeological site, which is dated between 1180 and 1235 AD, when the ancestors of the Penobscot people lived there. This seemed to suggest that the Norse may have been to the Maine region during the time, which is about a couple hundred years before the Christopher Columbus voyages. Since it seemed to be out of place, some thought it might be a hoax. On February 6, 1979, Kolbjorn Skare, a Norwegian numismatist, went to the Maine State Museum to see the coin and said the coin seemed to be authentic. The Bourbon Orleans Hotel is claimed to be a very haunted place. Ghosts of children and nuns have been seen throughout the hotel, as well as a lonely dancer in the ballroom. Before it was a hotel, the Orleans Ballroom was built in 1817 by John Davis, and the Orleans Theater was rebuilt around 1819. The original theater was burned down before Mr. Davis bought the property. And by 1881, the ballroom and theater were converted into a convent, orphanage, and school by the Sisters of the Holy Family, the first African-American religious order in the United States, which was founded by Henriette DeLille. Fort Delaware was constructed on Pea Patch Island as a means for added protection for Philadelphia and other towns in the area. Initially, there was a star-shaped fort built, but that was burned down in February of 1831. It took a long time for the replacement fort to get underway and completed, due to land dispute, diverting efforts to repairing the island's dike and seawall after a severe storm, and making sure that the new fort was more secure and ready for defense. It was used to imprison Confederate soldiers during the Civil War, where as many as 25,000 plus prisoners died. The fort was eventually decommissioned after World War II, and now is offered as a ghost tour destination. People have reported being tugged at and can hear the sounds of cannon fire and chains rattling. The Copper Queen Hotel is the longest continuously operated hotel in Arizona. The Brisbane Daily Review reported on February 9, 1902, that the hotel was now open for guests. Within a few months of opening, the hotel already had its first mystery. A man named F.M. Farrar went missing from the hotel, and his body was found a month later in New Mexico. The hotel is also claimed to be haunted by a woman named Julia Lowell, who took her own life on the property after being rejected by a love interest. She is sometimes seen dancing provocatively at the foot of the stairs. The Driscoll Hotel in Austin, Texas has a strange coincidence in its room 525. Two different women, 20 years apart, took their lives in the same room of the hotel while on their honeymoons. After being closed off to the public for a period of time, people started to experience unexplained things in the room, including seeing apparitions, weird sensations, hearing distant voices and noises, and unexplained leaks. After being saved from being demolished, Braniff International Hotels threw an official grand reopening celebration on February 10, 1973. The event included a parade of every Texas governor and/or their descendants since 1886 up until that time. The Pisano vase story is shrouded in mystery. It is listed as a cursed object, but cannot be located. The stories about the silver vase begin during the 15th century in Napoli, Italy. It was given to a bride as a wedding present the night before her nuptials, but she was found dead the next day. It was passed to various family members who also died shortly after receiving the vase. It seemed to disappear until 1988, when someone dug it up and sold it to an unknowing pharmacist through auction, who died a few months after purchasing it. The vase was then bought and sold by some other unlucky people, including a doctor and archaeologist who also passed. The family of the last victim tossed it out the window to get rid of it, but it was brought back to them by a police officer who was almost hit by the vase. He fined them, but they would not take the vase back. Another police officer took it upon himself to bury it again. No one knows where it ended up. On February 12, 1868, Daniel Drew signed the act to incorporate the seminary for what would become the Drew Theological School. It is known as the Drew University today. It is not without its fair share of hauntings. In the Great Hall, some say that ghostly faces appear in the ceiling carvings, and that the chandeliers swing on their own. An apparition of a man with round gold spectacles appears in a mirror in the hall. A lady in blue is seen around the lake by the Arboretum, and a girl haunts the Hoyt Hall. The Caso artifact is a spark plug encased in a geode. It was discovered on February 13, 1961 by Wallace Lane, Virginia Maxey, and Mike Mikesell while they were prospecting for geodes near the town of Olancha, California. It appears to be an out-of-place artifact since the spark plug is found inside a 500,000-year-old geode. Was the spark plug dropped by a time traveler? Is the rock around the spark plug concentration? On display on the left side altar of the Church of Santa Maria in Comedian, Italy, is the skull of Saint Valentine. Saint Valentine was a real person who died around 270 AD. He was beheaded near Rome by the Emperor Claudius II for helping Christian couples wed. His skeletal remains were excavated in the 1800s and distributed as relics to various parts of the world. His feast day is celebrated on the 14th of February because it is believed that birds choose their mates in the middle of February. Hotel del Coronado opened to receiving guests on February 15, 1888 in San Diego, California. It is currently the second largest wooden structure in the U.S. after the Tillamook Air Museum. It is an example of the American architectural genre, the wooden Victorian beach resort. It is popular for both the living and the deceased. One of the ghosts on property is Kate Morgan, who died at the hotel in 1892. She is known to unpack guest suitcases and leave their clothes strewn about in room 3327. Things have been known to fly off the shelves of the gift shop as well. On a cheery note, the hotel was the first to have an outdoor Christmas tree put up on its lawn in the country in 1904. Strange occurrences happen at Ball Cemetery in Springfield, Nebraska, including gravestones that fall over and right themselves, ectoplasmic mist, voices and laughter coming from nowhere, and feeling of tugging on clothing. Some even report seeing a tall male figure walk around angrily and attack them. It is not recommended to trespass here, especially after one man reported to being possessed when he and his friends snuck into the cemetery one night in the 1990s. The living guard may make you stay longer than you want to, since there has been reports he's not afraid to use his shotgun for trespassers. The Moonville Tunnel is one of the few things left of the abandoned town, Moonville, Ohio. On February 17, 1895, Chillicothe Gazette reported, "A ghost, after an absence of 1 year, returned and appeared in front of a fright at the point where engineer Lawhead lost his life. The ghost is seen in a white robe and carrying a lantern, the eyes glistening like balls of fire, and surrounding it was a halo of twinkling stars." The engineer is not the only ghost witnessed at the tunnel. Others seen include the brakeman, who is believed to have fallen asleep on the tracks after becoming drunk. The Lavender Lady is an older woman who leaves the scent of lavender behind her appearances. The ghost of Baldy Keaton is called the Bully, who stands above the tunnel and will sometimes throw down pebbles at those passing through the tunnel. The Sedlic Ossuary is a Catholic chapel under the Cemetery Church of All Saints in the Czech Republic. The bones of between 40,000 and 70,000 people are estimated to be used to decorate the chapel. In 1278, Henry the Abbot of the Cistercian monastery in Sedlic came back with dirt from the land that Jesus was crucified at and sprinkled it over the cemetery back in Sedlic, making it very desirable to be buried there. When it came time to build a church on the cemetery property, the builders had to dig up a lot of graves. The skeletons from the excavations were put into the ossuary. Then in 1870, František Rent was hired to put the bone heaps in order. He took a creative approach and used the bones to decorate the space, including a chandelier. Kerry Walton and his brother explored an abandoned house in the small town Wagga Wagga in New South Wales, Australia in the 1970s, where they found the Leda doll under the floor. The doll got its name when the brothers were convinced they saw the doll moving inside the sack on their way home. They joked the doll must be telling them, "Let me out." After getting the doll home, they would notice that it would move around the house, leaving scuff marks where it traveled. The family had the doll taken to experts to be examined. To their surprise, they were told the doll was about 200 years old, probably made in Romania, and it had human hair on its head. A psychic told them the doll was inhabited by the spirit of a young boy, who the doll was modeled after, and drowned at a young age. In February 2015, the first Fairy Circle Symposium took place at Woolwedens, where various active Fairy Circle researchers met to discuss the different hypotheses. Fairy circles are circular patches of barren land within arid grasslands. It is most common in Namibia in southern Africa. Myths of the Himba people say the circles are the footprints of the gods. Scientists are coming up with their own theories. Augustin Lesage, living between August 9, 1876 and February 21, 1954, was a French coal miner who was inspired to paint through spirit voices he heard. He created large paintings with bright, colorful, symmetrical patterns. Augustin started to hear the voice of his sister in 1911 while working in the mine. She told him, "One day you will be a painter." Eventually, he started hearing other voices, and they instructed him what to paint, which art supplies to buy, and where to get them. He never knew what he was going to paint before starting his work until the spirits instructed him. He was able to start to support himself with his painting work by 1923. By his death, he had created over 800 paintings. Most of them are held at the Lille Métropole Museum of Modern, Contemporary, and Outsider Art in France. Since the 1990s, people have been reporting hearing a consistent hum in Taos, New Mexico. Only 2% of the population can hear it, but enough people have complained to hear it that it prompted scientists to study where the hum could be coming from. Unfortunately, the source has not been found, but many theories have been generated, including industrial sound pollution, underground tectonic plate movement, alien sources, and even internal vibrations. On February 22, 1993, according to the Albuquerque Journal, Rep. Bill Richardson and the U.S. House Committee staffers believed the sound was due to a defense project and asked several government agencies to look into it. The hum still continues today, however. The Battle of the Alamo between February 23 and March 6, 1836, was a pivotal event in the Texas Revolution. Even though the defenders of the building did not survive the battle, the structure was resilient and avoided destruction on several occasions by an unwielding fate. It initially was built as a church, but eventually became a fort after being Texas' first hospital. They changed the name of the church from San Antonio de Vallejo to the Alamo, after the cottonwood tree that symbolically kept its founder safe when deciding the new spot for the mission. General Houston had ordered the mission building to be blown up so that the enemy could not have access to the weaponry inside. But Colonel Bowie reassessed the situation and decided it was in their favor to keep the building standing. After the battle, the enemy general, Santa Anna, ordered to burn the Alamo down, but the soldiers were faced by 6 ghostly defenders with flaming swords that scared them away. General Andrade went to complete the task of burning the Alamo, but was met by a spirit holding balls of flame, scaring off the men that accompanied him. They left without burning the building down. After Texas joined the United States, the U.S. Army took over the Alamo and made a decision to dismantle the building a few decades later. Ghost sightings began to abound, and once again the Alamo was saved, and instead became a police station and prison. Eventually, the prison was moved due to the haunting activity. Now it is a museum, and ghosts still are seen around the property. In 1983, Don Decker experienced rain wherever he went for a period of time. On February 24th, his grandfather had passed away, and Don was allowed to leave prison for a few days to attend the funeral and spend time with his family. Don left the funeral early and went to stay the night with his friends. While at his friend's home, Don went into a trance-like state, and water started to drip from the ceiling, walls, and floors. The residents could not figure out where the water was coming from, and their landlord was unable to resolve the issue, so they called the police to assist. The police entered the residence and witnessed the water misting and asked that everyone leave while they investigate. The landlord stayed behind, but Don and his friends went to the nearby pizza shop. The rain stopped inside the residence, but then the water started to come from the ceiling, walls, and floors in the pizzeria. Once they left there, the water stopped, but started right back up once they got back to the home of their friends. The landlord called a preacher to pray for Don. Once the prayer started, Don convulsed and came out of this trance-like state. Once again, it stopped raining, but once Don returned to prison, it started to rain in his cell. A reverend was called in for Don. Once he started to read from the Bible, the rain stopped for good. Don believes it was his grandfather tormenting him, as his grandfather used to abuse Don as a child, and they did not have a good relationship. The government of Alberta, Canada, sponsored a contest to name the lake that was being formed by the construction of the Big Horn Dam in February of 1972. Abraham Lake was chosen to be named after Silas Abraham of the Stoney Nakoda First Nation. Unfortunately, the lake flooded the First Nations land that included cabins, graves, and pastures. The company that created the lake did not do enough planning before starting the project. Trapped methane gas from the decaying plants on the lake bed causes stacks of frozen bubbles to form under the ice on the lake's surface, making it a popular destination for nature's observers. But it is still dangerous as it is escaping flammable gas. The Los Angeles Herald-Examiner published Riddle of Asian Stone Disk from Outer Space on February 26, 1967. It was speaking about the Jerpa stones, which are claimed to be 12,000-year-old granite discs with a series of etchings telling a story of an extraterrestrial crashing to Earth in China. Supposedly, there were 716 discs found by Chi Pu Te in 1937 during an archaeological expedition in the Bayan R Mountains. By 1994, the disc had disappeared, leading people to believe it may be a hoax. A man by the name of Ed Litzgaunen claimed he knew the secrets used to build the ancient pyramids. He inferred that he used the same techniques in building his home, Coral Castle. On February 27, 1923, the Homestead Enterprise newspaper published a notice that E. Litzgaunen, a Californian, had purchased an acre of the R.L. Moser homestead and is planning to erect a home soon. Ed built his castle of oolite limestone in Florida City in 1923, but then moved all of it north 10 miles in 1936. He supposedly moved and built it by himself, which contributes to the mystery of how he moved tons of stone. The stones form walls, carvings, furniture, and a 2-story castle tower. No mortar was used to keep the stones together. Only their weight is used to keep them in place, but created with great precision. In 1986, the 8-foot stone gate stopped working, and it took 6 men and a crane to move the gate to be repaired. Bill Stoneham created the painting The Hands Resist Him in 1972. It is of a young boy and a doll in front of a glass door with hands pressed up against it. It was bought by John Marley at an art show. After the death of Marley, the painting disappeared until it finally made an appearance on eBay in February of 2000, with the claim the painting had a curse. The sellers of the painting claim the boy and doll move during the night, and that the doll sometimes holds a gun to the boy, making him leave the painting on occasion. What may add to the curse story is the fact that the art gallery owner where the painting was sold and the critic that wrote the initial review both died within a year of coming into contact with the painting.